They came at nightfall. Not like soldiers with banners or the pounding of hooves on the old dirt road, but like whispers under doorways and rattles behind the walls. First, it was the coughing soft, like a child's sob, then harsher, tearing through lungs, shaking the bones of the village. I remember standing in the cold dusk, watching a merchant collapse at the edge of the square, his hands trembling, his lips blue. They called it God's punishment. I called it the end of everything I knew. I was a cooper's son, a man of barrels and timber, living in a village so small it barely had a name. Days were simple, mending hoops, fetching ale, and listening to the old men at the tavern argue over taxes and harvests. My mother sang as she worked, my father smoked his pipe, and the church bells marked the rhythm of our days. But peace is a glass floor. You never know when it will crack beneath you. The first signs came from travelers. A tinker from the city, eyes wide with stories of sickness sweeping the ports, of whole neighborhoods silenced. We laughed him off. Every village thinks itself immune. Then the rats came. Skinny things with bald tails, darting through cellars, gnawing at grain sacks. We didn't know it then, but they were the heralds of our doom. When the first child died, they rang the bell once. By the end of the week, the bell tolled so often, it became the sound of breathing itself. The priest burned incense and muttered prayers. The midwife wept as she boiled rags, and the herbalist brewed potions so bitter they twisted your face into a knot. Nothing helped. The sickness spread like spilled ink, blotting one house then another. My friend Thomas, who had always been stronger than me, was gone in 2 days. My sister Anna, too small for this world, slipped away in my mother's arms. We buried them behind the chapel, where the grass was still soft. I remember the smell most. Not of rot, as you might think, but of sweat and fear, and the dampness of bodies too long in bed. The walls seemed to sweat, the air heavy with the scent of endings. At night, I would press my face into the blanket, praying for morning, but morning was no escape. Outside, the streets emptied. The baker's oven went cold. The smith's hammer fell silent. The market square turned into a graveyard of toppled stalls and scattered goods. Mothers stopped calling their children in to supper. There was no supper to call them to. We lived in a hush, so complete it rang in your ears. Maps tell the story we never could. From the ports of Messina, the Black Death swept through Europe like wildfire, crossing borders faster than horses could run. Historians say it claimed up to 50 million lives, nearly half the population. But numbers are clean things. They do not scream in the night or leave chairs forever empty at the table. We locked ourselves inside. My father nailed the door shut, muttering that no evil would pass these walls. But the sickness was already among us, crouched in the corners, waiting. My mother's face paled, her lips cracked, her hand shook. I tended her fever with trembling fingers, whispering nonsense prayers I barely believed. By the 3rd week, the village was a warren of ghosts. People wandered in rags, eyes glazed, mouths whispering things no one answered. The churchyard filled, then overflowed, until the gravediggers fled or fell. Fires burned at the edge of town, black smoke curling like questions into the sky. No one answered. I remember the sound of the carts most. wooden wheels groaning under the weight of bodies, the clink of rosaries dangling from stiff fingers, the soft thud as another shape was added to the pile. The dead were no longer buried one by one. They were heaped in pits, quicklime thrown over them, a hurried prayer if there was breath to spare. The bell in the chapel tower cracked from overuse, its voice a hoarse whisper that still echoes in my dreams. The streets were ruled by silence, but behind closed doors, madness reigned. Some drank themselves into stupor, others whipped their backs raw, begging for forgiveness. I watched neighbors carve crosses above their doors, pile garlic in windows, hang charms and bones as if superstition could bar the plague's path. But it crept under doorways. It soaked into walls. It waited where you least expected. We were fighting smoke with hands full of air. I remember the day the plague doctor came. Dressed like a bird from Nightmare, with his black robe, his wide-brimmed hat, his mask with the long-beaked nose. Children hid behind skirts. Grown men crossed themselves. He moved through the village like a shadow, poking and prodding, scribbling notes, burning herbs in the beak of his mask to ward off the miasma. But for all his learning, he was as helpless as the rest of us. I saw him stand over my father. His gloved hands pressed to my father's forehead. His fingers pinched the wrist. Then a small shake of the head, the kind you give when the storm has already split the tree. My father died before the next moonrise, his breath rattling like dry leaves. We buried him in the earth behind the house because the churchyard was full. Somewhere in those weeks, time broke. Days bled into nights. Hunger dulled the mind. Grief became a heavy coat I could not take off. I stopped counting the dead. My mother followed my father, then my uncle, then the neighbor who had once carved me a whistle from oak. And yet, through it all, I remained. A boy in a house of ghosts, waiting. They say some were immune, that by some accident of blood or blessing, they were spared. I do not know if I was chosen or cursed. All I know is that I walked from that house alone, my legs trembling, the world hollow around me. The village was a ruin, shutters swinging on broken hinges, dogs gnawing at forgotten bones, the air thick with the smoke of burning homes. I wandered. Fields lay fallow. Sheep roamed without shepherds. The roads were littered with abandoned carts. In some towns there were no living souls. Only the wind moved among the stones. In others, the desperate clung to life with teeth-bared barricaded inns, wandering bands, strangers with hollow eyes. Fear had become its own contagion. One night, beneath a sky so clear it cut the heart, I met a priest. He sat by a fire of stolen timber, his robes patched with traveler's rags, his hands raw from burying the dead. He spoke of repentance, of the wrath of God, of the world remade by suffering. I listened, but his words fell like ash. In the end, there was no meaning in the plague. It was a hunger without thought, a fire without intention. As winter came, I found shelter in an abandoned monastery. The walls were cold, the beds empty, the chapel silent except for the creak of beams. I scavenged what food I could, boiled roots, caught rainwater. In the long nights, I spoke aloud to the dark, naming the dead one by one until I slept from exhaustion. Their names are my rosary. Months passed. Spring returned, hesitant, as if the world itself feared to wake. Flowers bloomed in the cracks of broken streets. Birds nested in the eaves of abandoned homes. And slowly, like survivors from a shipwreck, people began to gather again. Faces marked by loss, hands rough from burial, eyes that flickered with old sorrow and new resolve. I joined them in silence. Words felt strange after so many months of solitude, like trying to fit old shoes on swollen feet. We shared what little we had, a crust of bread, a flask of water, the warmth of a fire built from fallen beams. Around the flames, we told our stories, not for comfort, but for proof that we were still real. I met a woman from the south, her hair streaked with ash and salt, who had lost 6 children but survived. A farmer missing 2 fingers, who had buried his whole village and come north seeking work. A boy no older than 12, eyes sharp as a wolf's, who never spoke but watched everything. We were a new tribe, forged by disaster, bound not by blood, but by the simple fact of breath. We began to rebuild. It was not grand, a roof patched here, a well cleaned there, seeds scattered into the soil with prayers we did not believe. But with each sunrise, the silence cracked a little more. A rooster's crow, a child's laugh, the rhythm of a hammer on wood. Life, that stubborn weed, pushed up through the ruins. In the evenings, I would walk to the edge of the fields, where the crosses marked shallow graves, and stand among them. Sometimes I spoke aloud. Sometimes I simply listened to the wind as it threaded through the grass. There was no answer, but I did not expect one. Grief is not a question looking for a reply. It is a house you learn to live inside. The plague had left its scars, not just on the body, but on the soul. We flinched when strangers approached. We washed our hands until they bled. We dreamed of fever and woke to the phantom touch of the dead. The world had shrunk, yet inside that smallness, we found a fierce, stubborn pulse. Historians would one day count the cost. 30, maybe 50 million lives across continents. Whole villages gone, dynasties toppled, economies shattered. But they would not know the names I whispered to the stars at night, or the weight of a hand that once rested on my shoulder. They would not know the silence of a home where laughter used to live. I have walked through cities where grass cracked the stones of the market square, where ivy climbed the walls of palaces, where churches stood hollow, their bells melted down for coin. I have seen kings' banners sagging in rain, courts emptied, songs forgotten. And I have seen, again and again, a single child's cry cut through the hush, and with it, the stubborn, aching return of life. There were moments, I will confess, when I wished I had not been spared, when the weight of memory bent my back, when the smell of damp earth reminded me too sharply of freshly turned graves. But each morning, as the sun slipped over the hills and painted the sky with bruised gold, I rose. To rise was its own rebellion. Now, years later, I sit with ink-stained fingers, trying to trap these ghosts in words. Not to forget, for forgetting is another kind of death, but to remember properly. To lay each memory down like a stone in the foundation of what we have rebuilt. We have not returned to what we were. The world after the plague is not the world before. We live smaller, closer to the land, wary of the wealth that once promised so much and delivered so little. We have learned to measure life not by its length, but by its weight. And yet, there is laughter again. Children race through the streets, their feet stirring dust from the old ruins. Lovers walk hand in hand beneath walls that once trembled with fear. We dance again, we sing, we remember, not because we are unscarred, but because we are. I often return to the monastery, though the roof has half collapsed and weeds have taken the cloister. There, in the chapel, light slips through shattered stained glass, painting the stone in bruised reds and golds. I sit on the cold bench where monks once prayed, and I close my eyes, feeling the hush settle over me like a familiar cloak. It is not peace, but it is something close. In the village square, we have raised a marker. It bears no names, no dates, just a carving of two hands clasped around a flame. We gather there on the anniversary, a circle of survivors, to light candles, to speak the names of those we carry in our hearts. The children listen, wide-eyed, trying to imagine a world before they were born, when the streets were empty and even the air seemed afraid. Some nights, when the wind is high and the moon rides low, I hear the echoes. A cough in the dark, a creak on the stairs, the soft shuffle of feet that no longer walk this earth. I do not fear them. They are the company I keep, the silent witnesses to a life forged in ash and remade in stubborn light. There is a truth I carry now, as unshakable as the scar on my wrist where the fever once raged. The world is always ending for someone. A fire, a flood, a sickness without a name, and yet, after the ash settles, after the water recedes, after the last bell tolls, someone is left to gather the pieces. To plant a seed, to sing a song, to build a home where grief once stood. The scholars will argue over the numbers. They will debate how the Black Death reshaped economies, toppled empires, shifted the axis of history. But they will not see the old woman who feeds the orphans from her meager scraps, the young man who hums a tune as he rebuilds the mill, the child who ties ribbons in the trees because life somehow goes on. I am old now. My hair has silvered, my hands tremble, and the boy who once watched the world burn has become the man who tends its embers. I have loved and lost again, as all men do. I have buried friends, held grandchildren, and watched seasons turn with the same quiet awe I felt as a boy standing in a field of graves. Sometimes I am asked why I survived. Was it chance? Was it fate? Was it punishment or blessing? I have no answer. But I know this: survival is not a prize. It is a task. To survive is to remember, to rebuild, to hold space for the stories of the fallen. On the edge of the village, a lone tree stands, its branches twisted by wind and time. We call it the Witness. Beneath its roots, the bones of the lost sleep, and in its branches, birds sing songs they will never hear. I sit beneath it often, my back pressed to its rough bark, my eyes on the sky. It reminds me that the past does not vanish. It grows, it blooms, it shadows every step we take. There are nights when I dream of before, of Anna's laughter, of Thomas's clumsy footsteps, of my mother's hands braiding my hair. In the dream, they turned to me smiling, their eyes clear, their voices soft as the wind in the wheat. And for a moment, I am that boy again, running through sunlit fields, the weight of the world not yet on my shoulders, but morning always comes. I rise, as I have done for years, as I will do until I can no longer. And each day, I offer the same small prayer, not for myself, but for those yet to come. May they know joy without sorrow, laughter without fear. May they dance in streets that remember but no longer ache. We are the children of ash and light. Our roots are tangled in loss, but our branches reach toward the sun. We are not the same as we were, and perhaps we were never meant to be. We are the broken who build, the scarred who sing, the survivors who remember. And so, if you hear this, if my voice carries beyond these pages, beyond this moment, know this: you are part of the chain. You are the living memory of all we were, all we lost, all we rebuilt. Carry it well. Carry it with love. And when the time comes, pass it on. As the seasons pass, I walk through the village, and I marvel at how the earth forgets. Grass pushes up through cobblestones that once rang with funeral processions. Wildflowers burst through cracks in the walls. Bees hum where silence once hung heavy. It is not that the world erases the past, but that it folds it in, layers it under petals and roots and song, until it becomes the soil from which new things grow. I remember when we dared to open the market again. It was a small thing, 3 tables, a few baskets of apples, a woman selling scraps of cloth, but it was everything. I watched a child reach for a plum with fingers that trembled from hunger and saw his mother's smile, just barely, as though her heart remembered how to stretch toward joy. That was the moment I understood. The world does not heal all at once. It knits itself back together, stitch by fragile stitch. We learned to live with memory, to let it sit at the table with us, to pour it a cup, to allow it to speak when it must, and fall silent when it can. There were days we could not bear to remember, and days we could not bear to forget. And so we learned to walk the thin line between a balancing act of grief and gratitude. I have seen the faces of new children, born after the plague, who run through these streets as if they have never known sorrow. Their laughter is sharper, their footsteps lighter, and when they fall, they rise with a determination that makes the old ones smile. We envy them sometimes, but we also protect them fiercely, because they are our answer to the dark. They are what we built from the wreckage. I have watched the fields turn green again, watched the orchards swell with fruit, watched the rivers clear of ash and run bright and cold. And yet, there are scars on the land that no rain will soften. In the hills, there are still the hollowed-out shells of villages left to the wind. Stones stacked in remembrance, doors swinging open to the empty sky. We visit sometimes to sweep the graves, to lay flowers, to remind ourselves of the price we paid. There is a song we sing now. It was born from the ashes, a melody carried from village to village, a simple tune that children hum when they skip rope, that elders murmur when they mend clothes by the fire. It has no words, or perhaps it has too many, but when we sing it, we remember. We remember the hands we held, the names we spoke, the nights we survived, I think often of Tomas, of Anna, of my parents whose faces have blurred at the edges with time, but whose presence still lingers in the quiet hours. I think of their dreams, of the lives they might have lived, and I carry them with me like a second skin. There is no forgetting, there is only carrying. And perhaps that is what it means to be human, to carry and to keep walking. The priests tell us that the plague was a punishment, a test of faith. The scholars call it an accident of rats and ships, collision of chance and trade. But for those of us who lived it, it was neither, and both. It was the breaking of the world, and its slow, stubborn mending. It was the silence after the last bell, and the first note of a song that rose to fill it. As the years roll on, new stories pile atop the old. There are weddings now, and harvest feasts, and fairs where ribbons fly, and children chase painted wooden horses. We dance in streets that once ran slick with sorrow. We drink toasts in taverns built on the bones of ruin. And when night falls and the fires burn low, we remember. Always, we remember. To those who will come after, I offer this. You will face your own darkness. It may not wear the face of plague, but it will come in fire, in flood, in the slow erosion of things you thought were permanent. And when it does, you will break. But then you will gather and build and sing, because that is what we do. That is what it means to endure. If you stand in the village square today, you will see the children chasing each other in circles, their laughter ringing off stone walls. You will see the old men sitting on benches, carving wood, telling tales to anyone who will listen. You will see the women hanging laundry in the sun, their faces tilted to the sky. And if you look closely, you will see the marks the past has left, the names carved into beams, the scars on old hands, the way the eyes of the elders flicker with memory when the wind changes. When night comes and the village settles into hush, I walk the familiar paths alone. The stars above seem closer here, as if they lean in to listen. I pause by the old oak near the edge of town, where once I watched the carts roll past heavy with sorrow. Now, the only sound is the whisper of leaves, the occasional cry of a night bird, the slow breathing of a world learning to rest again. I touch the trunk of the tree, rough and cold beneath my fingers, and I remember the hands that once joined here in prayer, the voices that rose together in desperation. I remember the way we lined up to receive bread when there was almost none, the way we shared what little we had because to hoard was to be alone, and to be alone then was to die. I remember the songs we made up to chase away the dark, the games we invented to distract the children when they were too hungry to sleep. I often wonder what the world will remember of us. Will it recall the numbers, the records of dead and dying, the decrees issued by kings and priests? Or will it remember the quiet, stubborn acts of those who survived, the nurse who stayed at her patient's side until her last breath, the blacksmith who hammered tools for graves and then for plows, the mother who hummed lullabies through her own fever so her child would not know fear? We are written into history not only by the ink of scholars, but by the breath of those who remember. Sometimes, when the wind is just right, I think I hear them, the voices of those we lost. Not as ghosts, not as omens, but as part of the land itself. In the rustle of the wheat, in the crackle of the hearth, in the hush between heartbeats. They are with us still, woven into the fabric of what we have become. The younger ones ask me why I never left, why I never took the road to the cities, to the new lands opening beyond the sea. And I tell them this, because here, every stone, every tree, every breath carries the memory of those who taught me how to live when the world was dying. Because to leave would be to sever a thread in a tapestry already worn thin. Because some roots, once set, hold you not with chains but with love. As I sit now by the fire, pen in hand, I feel the weight of years pressing gently on my shoulders. I write for those who will come after, for the children of children I will never meet, so that when they walk these streets, they will know what came before. Not to haunt them, not to burden them, but to remind them that they are part of a long, unbroken line of hands reaching out in the dark. There are days when I fear they will forget. That the world will rush forward, hungry for progress, and leave behind the lessons we paid so dearly to learn. But then I see a child place flowers on a grave, or a young couple carve their names into the old oak, and I remember, memory is not kept in books or monuments alone. It lives in gestures, in stories, in the simple act of remembering. The sun rises again, as it always has, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. I step out into the light, feeling its warmth on my face, and for a moment the years fall away. I am that boy again, barefoot in the dew-wet grass, running toward the sound of a bell that means supper is ready and the world is, for a little while, whole. I have learned that survival is not about outlasting the storm. It is about learning how to dance in the rain, how to find beauty in broken things, how to build a home from the rubble of what you once knew. It is about carrying the memory of those who walked before you, not as a burden, but as a lantern to light your way. So, if you hear this, if my words reach you across time and distance, let them be a reminder. You are not alone. You walk a path paved by the feet of those who endured, those who stumbled and fell and rose again. You are part of a great, unfinished story, one that stretches back into shadows and forward into light. And when your time comes, as it comes for us all, may you leave behind not riches or monuments, but memories. May you be the reason someone stands taller, laughs louder, dreams deeper. May you be a thread in the tapestry, a note in the song, a spark in the dark. May you live not forever, but well. When I close my eyes now, I do not see the plague, the death, the ruin. I see faces, lit by firelight and sunlight, smiling and weeping, working and resting. I see hands reaching out to clasp other hands. I see a world broken, yes, but also mended, remade, reborn. And in that, I find peace. I walk the fields at dawn, when the mist still clings to the earth like a memory. The sun, a pale coin rising over the hills, touches the land we thought we had lost. I see footprints in the soft earth, traces of children running to the river, of farmers bent to the plow, of lovers wandering beneath the trees. Life leaves its mark, as death once did, and both are part of the same great turning. The bells ring again now, but not just to mourn. They toll for weddings, for births, for the planting of seeds and the harvest of grain. When they sound, I close my eyes and let the vibrations pass through me like a blessing. They remind me that the village breathes again, that the hearts of the living beat louder than the echoes of the past. I remember when the first festival was held after the plague. We gathered in the square, unsure, nervous, clutching each other like shipwrecked survivors learning to dance again. A fiddler played a tune we all half remembered, and slowly, shyly, feet began to move. Children ran between the dancers, hands sticky with honey cakes, and somewhere in the crowd, someone laughed the kind of laugh that splits the sky open and lets the light back in. There were tears, too. We wept for those who could not be there, for the chairs left empty at the feast, for the voices that would never join the chorus again. But the tears watered the ground beneath our feet, and from them new roots grew. Grief and joy became threads in the same cloth, and we wore it proudly, tattered and mended. And ours, I have watched the seasons turn, have marked them with notches on a beam above my door. Each spring brings a little more green, each winter a little less bite. There is a rhythm to it now, a steady heartbeat under the skin of the world, and in that rhythm, I find comfort. We have learned not to take it for granted, not to waste a single sunrise or squander a single laugh. There is a boy now, not unlike the boy I was, who runs barefoot through the village, a wooden sword in hand, slaying invisible dragons. I watch him from my bench beneath the oak, and I feel something rise in my chest. Not sorrow, not envy, but a fierce, aching hope. He does not know the weight we carry, and that is as it should be. His task is not to remember, but to live. I speak to the young sometimes when they ask. I tell them of the days when the air was thick with silence, when the streets knew only the shuffle of the desperate and the dying. I tell them of the hands I held, the prayers I whispered, the graves I dug. And then I tell them of the dawns that came after, of the way the world slowly leaned back toward the light. I tell them that survival is not a gift you keep, but one you pass on. In the chapel, the walls are marked with names, scratched in with knives, carved with trembling fingers, written in soot and ash. Some are nearly worn away, but we do not let them fade. We retrace them when they grow faint. We read them aloud on holy days. We tell their stories over and over until they become part of the marrow of this place. When I walk among the graves, I do not bow my head in sorrow. I greet them as old friends, as teachers, as the roots of the tree that still stands in the center of our square. I place a hand on the stones, cool and rough, and I whisper thanks for their lives, for their lessons, for the reminder that nothing is promised and everything is precious. The road out of the village is still there, winding toward the horizon. Sometimes, travelers pass through, bringing news of distant lands, of cities rebuilding, of wonders and terrors beyond our hills. I listen, I marvel, but I do not follow. My place is here, among the living and the dead, among the memories and the mornings, among the echoes and the songs. One day when I am gone, they will gather here. They will speak my name, perhaps light a candle, perhaps sing the song that carried us through the dark. And then they will laugh and dance and tell stories, and the world will turn on, as it always has, as it always will. And in that, I will endure, not as a shadow, but as a note in the music, as a thread in the weave, as a hand on the shoulder of those yet to come. The night sky is a tapestry of stars, each one a tiny flame against the vast dark. I often sit beneath it, wrapped in a woolen cloak, my breath curling in silver wisps, and I think of the souls that have passed through this world. I wonder if they look down on us, if they see the gardens we have planted over their resting places, if they smile at the sound of children's laughter rising up from the earth. Perhaps they do. Perhaps it is their gift to us, the knowledge that we were never truly alone. As the seasons turn, we mark them not with grand ceremonies, but with small acts. We plant a new tree at spring's first thaw. We light candles at midsummer. We gather in the square as autumn leaves fall. And in winter, we share our bread and our stories. These rituals anchor us, remind us that the wheel keeps turning, that what was lost has given root to what now grows. There is an old man who carves figures from wood, his fingers knotted with age, but sure in their work. He shapes saints and sinners alike, tiny faceless forms that sit in windows, on mantels, in children's hands. He says, it does not matter who they are meant to be, only that they remind us to look up, to hope, to remember. And so they do. The river that runs through our village carries both memory and promise. Once, it bore the bodies we could not bury, its surface heavy with the weight of death. Now, it runs clear, its banks lined with reeds and wildflowers, its waters laughing over stones. We gather there on warm evenings, letting its song fill the spaces where sorrow once echoed. The river teaches us to keep moving, to let go, to flow towards something new. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the bell tolling, the cries of the grieving, the shuffle of feet on cold ground. But I can also hear the songs we sang to the dawn, the rustle of wheat in the fields, the sharp crack of a child's laughter cutting through the hush. These sounds live together inside me, a chorus of loss and life, forever intertwined. In the quiet of my home, I keep a candle burning. Not for light, the fire in the hearth is enough, but for remembrance. Its small flame flickers and dances, casting shadows on the walls, and I watch it as though it holds the stories of all I have known. When the night is deep and I am alone with my thoughts, I speak to that flame as I once spoke to the stars. It listens without judgment, without reply, and in that silence I find peace. We are not who we were before. We are scarred, reshaped, softened in places and hardened in others. We carry the past with us, but we do not let it weigh us down. Instead, we let it guide our hands when we build, temper our voices when we speak, sharpen our sight when we look to the horizon. We are the sum of all we have endured, and we are more because of it. There is a phrase we say now, passed from mouth to mouth like a blessing, a reminder, a shield. We are still here. We whisper it in the fields. We murmur it over graves. We shout it in celebration. It is not defiance, nor pride, but simple truth. We are still here, and that is everything. On market days, the square overflows with color and noise. Children chase each other between the stalls. Merchants call out their wares. The smell of fresh bread and roasting meat fills the air. For a moment, It feels as though the world has always been this way, busy, bright, alive. But then, I catch a glimpse of the old chapel, its stones darkened by time, its bell long since stilled, and I remember, and I smile, because to remember is to honor. In the evenings we gather by the fire, old and young alike. We tell stories, some true, some not, all necessary. We speak of the ones who came before, of the hardships they faced, of the triumphs they earned. The children listen wide-eyed, their hands tucked into their mothers' laps, their hearts open to the lessons hidden in the tales. This is how we pass the torch, with words, with memory, with love. One day, my time will come. I feel it approaching, slow but sure, like the changing of the season. When it does, I will go without fear, without regret, for I have lived a life woven through with meaning. I have seen death and chosen life. I have known sorrow and chosen joy. I have stood in the ashes and chosen to build. When they lay me to rest, I ask only this: let them sing. Let them dance. Let them tell stories and laugh and cry, remember. Let them plant something new over the place where I sleep, so that I may become part of the earth's turning, part of its endless, aching beauty. And let them say, as we have always said, we are still here. Morning breaks soft across the hills, the first rays of sunlight spilling like melted gold over the rooftops. I stand at the threshold of my home, the cool air brushing my skin, the smell of dew and earth filling my lungs. Around me, the village stirs, a rooster crows, a door creaks open, a child's voice calls out in laughter. These are the sounds of survival, the quiet drumbeat of a world learning once more to thrive. I walk the narrow path to the river, where the willows dip their fingers into the water. I kneel, cupping the cold stream in my hands, and I drink, feeling the chill spread through me like a benediction. This river has seen everything the dead carried away, the prayers whispered on its banks, the offerings of flowers sent floating downstream. It has wept with us and sung with us, and now it carries us forward. On the edge of the village, a field stretches wide and open, the soil dark and rich. Here we plant, season after season, the cycle repeating itself with comforting certainty. I run my fingers through the dirt, feeling its warmth, its promise. From this earth we rise, to this earth we return. It is the oldest truth, the one we learned again when everything else was stripped away. In the square, preparations begin for the harvest feast. Tables are set, torches are lit, garlands are strung from window to window. The air hums with anticipation, with the quiet understanding that every celebration is a triumph over what we have endured. I watch the children chase each other, their feet kicking up clouds of dust, and I feel a tenderness so fierce it nearly brings me to my knees. When the music starts, I close my eyes and let it fill me. The beat of the drum, the trill of the flute, the rise and fall of voices blending in song, it is the sound of a people reclaiming joy. I remember when we thought we might never hear music again, when the world seemed too broken to carry a tune. But here we are, still singing. As night falls, the stars bloom overhead, and we gather around the fire. We pass cups of warm cider, break bread, share stories. Some are old tales, handed down from generation to generation, shaped and reshaped like river stones. Others are new, born of this place, this time, these hearts. Together they form the patchwork of who we are, a tapestry of sorrow and hope. I catch glimpses of the past in quiet moments, a shadow at the edge of my vision, a whisper in a familiar voice, a scent that drifts through the air and is gone before I can name it. These are the gifts the dead leave us, the echoes that remind us to cherish what we have. I welcome them now, these brief visitations, these brushes with memory. They are not hauntings, but blessings. Sometimes, late at night, I walk the lanes alone, the lantern in my hand casting a trembling circle of light. I trace the paths I once feared to tread, past homes now rebuilt, past gardens where once there was ruin. I pause at the chapel, its roof patched, its doors open to all, and I offer a silent prayer not for myself, but for the world, for its stubbornness, its fragility, its immense trembling beauty. The faces I have known come to me in dreams. They are young again, whole again, laughing in the sunlit streets, their voices raised in song. I walk among them, unseen but not unloved, and I wake with tears on my cheeks and gratitude in my heart. For they live in me, as I will live in those who come after. There is a boy who visits me sometimes, bringing me bread, asking for stories. He listens with wide eyes, his hands clasped around his knees, his breath held tight in his chest. When I finish, he always asks the same question: will it happen again? And I tell him the only truth I know, that the world is fragile, that sorrow will come, but so will joy, so will love, so will the strength to rise again. And that as long as we remember, as long as we carry the stories forward, we will never be lost. The years pass as softly as the wind through the trees. I rise each morning, greet the sun as it lifts over the hills, feel the warmth on my face and whisper, thanks for one more day. My hands, once steady and strong, tremble now as they lift the cup, as they carve the bread, as they stroke the heads of the children who run past my door. But still, they work. Still, they remember. The village has grown around me like a second skin. Where once there were ruins, now there are gardens. Where once the air was filled with wailing, now it carries the sound of hammers, of laughter, of life returning in 100 small ways. New faces, new voices, new dreams, they all gather in the marketplace, in the chapel, in the fields, weaving a future I will not see but already love. I sit beneath the oak, its branches spread wide and sheltering, its leaves whispering secrets to the sky. Beneath this tree, I have laughed, wept, prayed, and dreamed. Beneath this tree, I have held the hands of friends as they passed from this world. And beneath this tree, I have watched children take their first steps. It is my anchor, my witness, my cathedral of leaves. At dusk, the village glows with lantern light, golden orbs swaying in the breeze, casting gentle halos on stone and wood. I walk through the streets, nodding to neighbors, pausing to admire the roses climbing the walls, the ivy curling around door frames. I hear music drifting from an open window, the lilt of a fiddle, the tap of dancing feet, and I feel a swelling in my chest that is part joy, part sorrow, part something I have no name for. I have written down what I can, the names, the faces, the moments that shaped us. I have tried to capture the way the sun fell on a child's hair, the hush of a winter morning, the sound of a voice calling home through the dark. But some things are beyond words. They live in the heart, in the blood, in the bone. They are carried forward not in pages, but in the quiet choices we make every day. The young ones stand taller now, their shoulders broad with the weight of responsibility. I see in them a fierceness I recognize, the same stubborn will to live that pulled me through the darkest nights. They build new homes, new roads, new dreams, but they do not forget the old. On holy days, they gather in the square, they light candles, they sing the songs passed down to them, and I watch with a heart that is full beyond measure. When the last frost gives way to spring, the fields come alive with color. Wildflowers bloom in the meadows, bees drift lazily through the orchards, and the river runs quick and laughing once more. I sit by its edge, watching the water tumble over stones worn smooth by time, and I let the sound carry me back to other days, other springs, other beginnings. In the chapel the bells ring out once more. They ring not for death but for life, for weddings, for births, for the simple joy of another morning come. I close my eyes and let the sound wash over me, a baptism of memory and hope, and I feel deep in my bones the rightness of it. We were not meant to live in mourning forever. We were meant to rise, to rebuild, to rejoice. Sometimes I speak aloud to those I have lost. I tell them of the children learning to read by candlelight, of the lovers walking hand in hand beneath the moon, of the feast laid out beneath the stars. I tell them that we remember, that we honor, that we live not just for ourselves but for them, for the legacy they left us, for the world they never got to finish. And in the quiet of my heart, I hear their reply. Not in words, but in the rustle of leaves, in the ripple of water, in the laughter of a child skipping down the lane. I hear them say, "You have done well. You have kept the flame. You have carried us forward." And I bow my head, and I give thanks for the gift of memory, for the gift of time, for the gift of love that outlasts even the darkest night. As I sit now, the candle flickering low beside me, I know my time draws near. I do not fear it. Death has walked beside me all my days. We are old acquaintances. I will go as I have lived, with open eyes, with a full heart, with a quiet song on my lips. And when I go, I hope they will gather beneath the oak. They will tell the stories, they will dance in the firelight, and they will say, with voices strong and sure, "We are still here." And that will be enough.